Montana Territory, January 1883. The snow had not stopped falling in 3 days, and by the time Orion Gallagher spotted her from the crest of the ridge, the wind had turned sharp as broken glass. She was walking barefoot. No coat, no gloves. Just a thin calico dress whipping around her knees like the wind meant to tear it off her. He kicked his horse hard. By the time he reached her, she had dropped to her knees in the snow, head bowed, arms limp, thin, shivering, and silent. "Good God," Orion muttered, sliding down from the saddle. He wrapped his coat around her before his boots even hit the ground. She blinked up at him, dazed. Her lips cracked and blue. I didn't know where else to go." "You're freezing," he said, scooping her up with ease. "Come inside. I'll get you warm." She did not fight him. Her body was too far gone. He mounted again quickly, cradling her against his chest, and turned the horse toward the cabin tucked in the valley below, a half-mile ride through thickening snow. He did not speak again until they reached the cabin. No use wasting breath in the cold. Inside, he laid her gently on the bearskin rug by the fireplace and stoked the fire higher, the flames catching fast and hot. Then he stripped off his gloves and started working on her feet. Red, swollen, frostbitten at the toes. He grabbed a wool blanket from the cot and wrapped it around her shoulders. She flinched, then leaned into the warmth. "I'll get water on the stove," he said. "You need tea. Something hot." She nodded, barely. He moved with practiced ease, lighting the lantern, boiling water, adding dried herbs. The cabin smelled of pine and smoke and something sweeter, lavender. Maybe from a pouch she must have carried under her dress. It clung to her skin. He handed her a tin cup. "Sip it slow." She took it with shaking hands. Only then did he kneel in front of her again. "What's your name?" "Opal," she whispered. "Opal Ashford." "Opal." He said it like something soft. "Where were you walking from?" Her eyes flicked toward the door, haunted. "North. I came from a farm near 2 rivers. It's not there anymore." "Fire." "No," she said. "Men." His jaw tightened. "I had 2 brothers. They're gone now." He did not press her. Not yet. Instead, he walked to the back wall and pulled out a folded flannel shirt, a pair of dry stockings, and wool trousers cinched with a drawstring. "I know it's all too big, but it's dry and warm. You can change behind the curtain." She nodded, already trying to stand. "Take your time," he said, turning away. When she came back out, she looked smaller but steadier. Her damp hair hung in dark ropes down her back. She curled up near the fire again, the blanket still around her, hands cupped around the empty tin. He handed her a second cup, fuller this time. She drank. "You live here alone?" she asked, voice hoarse. "I do." "No wife?" "No, why not?" Orion leaned back in the chair across from her. "She died. Long time ago." Opal looked at him, something in her eyes softening. "I'm sorry." He nodded once. "Were you alone at that farm?" "No." Her voice cracked. "I had a son. His name was Nathaniel. He was 6. They took him." The room went so still it felt like the wind stopped outside. Orion stood slowly. "Took him." She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "They said they would sell him east. I tried to fight them. They laughed at me." He turned toward the coat rack, his rifle leaning beside it. "Where was this?" 2 days north. A shack near the bend in the Yellowstone. "I know the place." She looked up at him, startled. "You do?" "I used to run cattle through there. There's a trail that loops behind the creek. If they're headed east, I can track them." Opal gripped the blanket tighter. "You would do that?" He met her eyes. "You got barefoot through a snowstorm to save your boy. I can ride through one." "But why?" He paused. "Because no one should be left alone out here. Not like that." Her lips trembled. "You need to rest," he said. "You are no good to him half dead." "I will not sleep." "You will, if I sit by the fire with you." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. He sat. She leaned against the hearth, closer now. Her hand brushed his where it rested on the rug, and neither of them moved it. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, the fire cracked and popped. Opal's breathing slowed. Her head dropped to his shoulder. He did not move. She was still asleep when the sun rose over the white hills. But he did not sleep that night, not once. His eyes stayed on her the whole time. The wind had quieted by morning, but the cold deepened. Orion stepped outside at first light, breath pluming in the pale hush, and scanned the horizon. The snow had drifted high along the fence line. His gelding stood hock deep near the lean-to, steam rising from his flanks. He'd have to take the bay if he meant to ride hard. Inside the cabin, Opal stirred when the door latched behind him. She sat up slowly, blinking at the light, the blanket sliding down to her lap. The clothes still hung loose on her, sleeves rolled and cinch-tied double at her waist. Her eyes were clearer now, but rimmed still with exhaustion. Orion poured her the last of the water from the kettle and knelt to lace his boots. "You're going after them today," she said, not asking. "I am." Her fingers curled around the tin. "How many do you think there were?" 3 horses. That's what the tracks showed. Could be more men walking, but I'll know better once I find their trail. She looked down. "What if they already crossed the river? Then I follow it east." Her voice was quiet. "And if they've got a head start? I ride faster." Opal set the cup aside. "I want to come with you." He shook his head, not unkindly. "You'd slow me down." "I wouldn't." "You would," he said. "Your feet are still bad. You haven't eaten near enough. And if we cross trouble, I need my hands free." She bit her lip, but didn't argue again. "How long will it take?" "If I don't find them by sundown, I'll make camp and keep on at first light. I'll bring him back." Her hands twisted in her lap. "He's afraid of thunder, and he chews his shirt sleeves when he's nervous. If they hit him, he won't cry. He'll just go quiet." Orion nodded once. "I'll watch for that." She stood abruptly, wobbling a little, and went to the shelf above the hearth. From the pocket of her discarded dress, she pulled a small folded square, a child's handkerchief, stitched with clumsy blue thread. She pressed it into his hand. He dropped it before they rode off. "I thought if he saw it, maybe he'd know I'm coming." Orion tucked it into the inside of his coat without a word. He saddled the bay and packed light jerky, a skin of water, a coil of rope, and cartridges. Before he mounted, he looked back at the cabin. She stood in the doorway, arms wrapped around herself, hair lifting in the wind. "Keep the fire going," he said. "I'll wait." He rode out without looking back. The trail was faint but there. By midday, he found the broken branch where one rider had doubled back, maybe to check for pursuit. Horse dung still steamed under a pine. They weren't far ahead. He pushed harder, coaxing the bay into a lope when the ground allowed it. The clouds held low and sullen, but didn't break. At a bend near a frozen creek, he found a scrap of canvas snagged on a branch wagon cloth, faded red. He dismounted and studied the ground. Wagon ruts, shallow but fresh. He followed them along the ridge and saw smoke. They'd made camp in a hollow, wind-sheltered by rocks. 2 men sat near the fire. A third stood at the wagon's side, urinating into the snow. No sign of the boy, but there was a tarp thrown over the back end. Orion backed away, lips pressed tight. He waited until dusk softened the sky, then circled wide, tying off his horse behind a thicket. He moved quiet as breath, rifle in hand. He waited for the first man to wander from the fire to piss. The crack of the rifle dropped him clean. The other two spun, shouting, drawing pistols. Orion was already moving. The second shot took one through the chest. The last man fired wild, missed, bolted for the trees. Orion didn't follow. Instead, he ran to the wagon. "Nathaniel," he called low. A muffled sound. He lifted the tarp. The boy huddled in the straw, face smeared with dirt, eyes wide with recognition at the square of cloth Orion pulled from his coat. "Your mama sent me." The boy stared at him, breath hitching, then launched forward, arms tight around his neck. Orion carried him out of that hollow before the moon had cleared the ridge. Nathaniel slept with his cheek pressed to Orion's chest, one hand tangled in the folds of his coat as they rode. The boy hadn't spoken since they left the hollow, but he hadn't let go, either. By the time the cabin came into view, dusk had faded into the deep blue of evening. Smoke curled steady from the chimney. Opal stood just beyond the door, a kerosene lamp in her hand, the light trembling faintly across the snow. When she saw them, she stepped forward without a sound. Her face didn't change right away, like her body hadn't yet caught up to what her eyes saw. Then Nathaniel lifted his head, and the lamp slipped from her grip, landing soft in the snow. "Mama!" She ran. Orion dismounted quickly, lifting the boy down into her arms. She kissed his hair, his cheeks, his forehead, her hands moving over him as though to assure herself every part was real. Nathaniel clung to her neck, silent tears soaking her collar. "I told you I'd come," she whispered. Orion stepped back, giving them space. He gathered the dropped lamp, brushed snow from the glass, and relit it. By the time he turned back, Opal had settled on the stoop with Nathaniel in her lap, rocking slightly. Her gaze met Orion's over the boy's shoulder. It held something quiet but certain. Inside, the warmth hit like a wave. The fire hadn't burned down much, she'd tended it well. Orion laid another log on it, then stepped to the cupboard and took down the tin of cornmeal. "He'll be hungry." Opal nodded, not looking away from her son. "He hasn't eaten since yesterday morning. Then we'll feed him." She settled Nathaniel near the hearth and helped him off with his damp boots. Orion stirred a pot of mush over the fire, adding dried apples and a pinch of salt. When he handed the bowl to the boy, Nathaniel looked up at him like he didn't quite know how to thank someone without words. Then he dug in, eating slow but steady. Orion sat at the table, hands wrapped around a warm cup. His shoulders ached from the ride, and his knees buzzed with strain, but there was a quiet in the room he hadn't known in years. Not silence, something warmer. Opal stood after Nathaniel finished and rinsed the bowl with melted snow water. Her movements were slower now, more deliberate. She didn't look at Orion until the boy crawled into the cot and curled beneath the quilt, fast asleep in minutes. She turned then, her face unreadable. "You could have been killed. But I wasn't. You didn't even ask if I wanted you to go alone. You didn't need to. It was written all over your face." She stepped closer, her hands rubbing together like she wasn't sure what to do with them. "You didn't know him. You didn't owe us anything." "I don't see it that way." "Then how do you see it?" Orion stood slowly, the chair creaking behind him. "I saw a woman walk through a storm with nothing but a dress and a name. I saw her shake and still keep going. That boy's the only thing she had left, and she didn't quit. Not once. That tells me everything I need about what he's worth." She crossed her arms, but not in defense. "You didn't have to care. I did anyway." The fire popped once behind them. She looked down at her feet. "I ain't sure how to live now." "You don't have to know yet." She looked up then, meeting his gaze with something steadier than before. Her voice was quiet, but sure. "I can cook. I can mend. I've worked stock before. I know how to keep quiet. I never asked for quiet." "Well," she said, her mouth twitching just slightly, "you got it anyway." that pulled the faintest breath of a smile from him. She stepped closer. "I don't want to leave. You don't have to. I don't have anything else to offer. You brought him back with you. That's everything." She stood there a long moment before resting her hand against his chest. Fingers spread. He covered it with his own. Outside, snow began to fall again. Softer this time, like something gentle, not cruel. She didn't pull away, and neither did he. The winter held fast for another week. Each morning, Orion rose before the sun and split wood while the wind cut across the valley. He'd glance toward the window, and though she never stood there, he always felt her watching. The noise of the axe was the only sound for miles, but it didn't feel lonely anymore. Inside, Opal stitched new hems into his spare shirts, her fingers deft and quiet. She didn't hum, didn't fill the silence with talk, just worked, steady as breath. Nathaniel trailed her like a calf to its mother, never more than a few paces off. He didn't speak much, but he watched everything. When Orion showed him how to loop twine through the handles of the water buckets, he learned it after one try. One evening, with the wind asleep and the fire low, Opal sat across from Orion at the table, her fingers curled around a tin cup of broth. Nathaniel slept against the far wall, curled in the old rocker, mouth parted in peace. Orion leaned back, the chair creaking beneath him. "He's strong," he said. "He always was," she answered, eyes on her son. "Even as a baby, he never cried unless it meant something. He's quiet. So's his mother." Orion gave a short nod, then reached for the tin kettle. "You think he'll remember any of it?" "He already does," she said, not lifting her gaze. "He won't talk about it, but it's there. Some things settle deep." He poured the rest of the water into her cup. "You remember it too." "I do. You don't need to explain." "I know." She looked over at him finally. "But I think I want to." He didn't interrupt. "They came around the first time in early October. Said they were collecting debts for the war-old ones. Claimed my brother owed them for cattle lost to raiders, but we never owned more than 3 head. They took the gray and a sack of flour. Said they'd be back." Orion's hands rested quiet on the table. "When they returned, they brought more men. I sent Nathaniel out to the woods with a sack of dried beans and told him to stay hidden if he heard yelling. He did, but not long enough. I saw them catch him. One of them laughed when he took him by the collar. Told me to learn what happens when people don't pay." She set the cup down gently. "I didn't think I'd see him again." "You did," Orion said. "Because of you." He shook his head once. "I only rode. You brought him back." She leaned forward, her elbows on the table, voice low. "I've been thinking about staying." "You already are. I mean past the snow." Orion's eyes searched hers. "You sure?" "I'm not afraid of work, and I don't expect anything easy. But I've been running so long I forgot what it felt like to stop. And here," she glanced around the room, "I don't feel like I'm waiting for something to fall apart." He stood then, slow and thoughtful, and crossed to the hearth. The light from the flames carved long shadows across his face. "I never thought I'd want someone here again." She rose too, quiet as a whisper, and joined him by the fire. "But you do now?" He nodded once. She didn't reach for him, not yet. They stood close, the warmth of the fire between them, neither speaking. Then she said, "You think he'd be happy here?" Orion glanced to the boy sleeping in the rocker. "I think he already is." She stepped forward, and this time her hand found his. He didn't hesitate. Their fingers laced like they'd done it 100 times already. Outside, the snow began to melt along the southern eaves. The wind shifted, and the air held the faintest edge of thaw. Inside, 2 lives once scattered and separate began to settle into something shared. Quietly, steadily. as if winter had never touched them at all. By early March, the thaw had taken hold. Water ran beneath the snowpack in shallow rivulets, carving muddy veins through the pasture. Orion repaired fence posts loosened by the cold, while Opal read from an old primer she found wedged behind the shelf. Nathaniel tracing letters in the ash with a stick. The days stretched longer, and the nights lost their edge. One evening, Orion returned from the creek with a brace of trout slung over one shoulder. He found Opal on her knees near the hearth, scrubbing the soot from the stones with a rag. Her sleeves were pushed up, and her hair hung loose, streaked with the warmth of firelight. "You didn't need to do that," he said, setting the fish on the table. "I wanted to," she answered, rinsing the cloth in a basin. "The place feels lived in now. Might as well keep it clean." He pulled up a chair, watching her. "You ever think about the kind of place you'd like to live before?" She wrung out the rag and sat beside him. "I used to imagine a little plot by the river, where the grass stayed green longer than a week. A garden, maybe. Chickens. Never thought about Montana? Didn't have much chance to. The world kept pulling me east and west, never north." He ran a hand along the table's edge. "I've got tools in the shed. Timber enough for a coop, if we cut it right." She looked at him, something unreadable in her expression. "You're saying this like we're setting down roots." "I am." Her fingers brushed his forearm. "You sure?" "I've been sure since the day I saw you in the snow and hoped to God you'd keep breathing." She leaned in, her voice low. "I don't want to be looked after." "You're not. You're being chosen." He kissed her then. It wasn't rushed or uncertain, just quiet and steady like everything else between them. Her hand came to rest at the back of his neck, and she didn't pull away. When they parted, her forehead stayed against his for a long moment. That night, she moved her things from the cot to the bed beside his. Nathaniel curled back into the rocker, already growing too tall for it, and Orion carved his name into the underside of the windowsill, just beside the one he'd carved years ago for someone he buried long ago. No new ghosts followed them into spring. By planting time, the three of them worked the soil in long rows behind the cabin. Nathaniel took to the rhythm easily, dropping seeds and covering them quick with his palm. Opal sang under her breath when she thought no one was listening. Orion built the coop, just like he said, and brought home 6 hens from a neighbor who owed him a favor. One afternoon, while Nathaniel ran after a stray hen, Opal stood at the edge of the field, her skirts hitched high to keep from dragging in the mud. "Did you ever think you'd have this again?" she asked. He wiped his brow with the back of his arm. "No, but I don't think I ever had it to begin with." She looked toward the cabin. "It's not much. It's enough." She stepped closer. "I never saw myself staying anywhere. But I don't feel like I'm waiting to leave." "You don't have to go," he said. "I know. I don't want to." She hesitated, then reached for his hand. "I want to wake up beside you. I want to raise him here. I want to grow old with my hands in the dirt and your voice in the next room." He curled his fingers around hers. "Then stay." "I will." They were married under the cottonwoods in late June, with Nathaniel holding a bundle of wildflowers and the creek running soft behind them. A traveling preacher passing through read from a worn Bible, and their vows were short but certain. There were no guests beyond the birds and the wind, but Orion's hand never left hers. That night, as dusk fell over the valley and the chickens settled in their roost, Nathaniel lay curled on a straw mattress near the hearth, dreaming easy. Orion sat on the steps with Opal leaning against him, her head on his shoulder. "You ever think we'd end up here?" she asked. "No, but I think it's exactly where we're meant to be." They watched the stars rise, slow and sure. The air smelled of turned earth and pine pitch. Inside, the fire dimmed, and the cabin held the kind of quiet that didn't ask for anything more. and they didn't give it anything less.